Hello, everyone. This is part 4 of our Passion Week series. Here at the church, we've been looking at each day of the Passion Week. Again, for those of you who are just jumping on this video for the first time, Passion Week is the term that's given to the week that led up to the eventual capture, crucifixion, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Every day has a different term. Today being Thursday, the term is Maundy Thursday. Now, I never really understood what that meant. I had to look it up, honestly. It's a term that means commandment, or at least it's derived from a term that means commandment. And there's a lot that goes on Thursday, from the washing of the disciples' feet to the commandment to love one another as yourselves. But there's one really key piece of scripture that I'd like to focus in on, and one of the biggest highlights of that day, which was the sharing of the Passover meal, or as the Bible describes it now, the Last Supper. This is the last meal that Jesus has with his disciples. And if you think about last meals, there are last words that come along with the final instructions. These are things that he wants to make sure the disciples understand. Obviously, Jesus knows the end from the beginning. He knew what each of them were going to do. He knew what was going to happen. And he was trying his best to prepare them. And there's two verses right towards the middle part, or I should say more towards the middle end part, in Luke chapter 22. Verse 31 through 32, Jesus says something really interesting, specifically to Peter. He says, "Simon, Simon," that was the original name of Peter. "Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift each of you like wheat. But I have pleaded in prayer for you, Simon, that your faith should not fail. So when you have repented and turned to me again, strengthen your brothers." I think this is a really fascinating piece of scripture, one that's always stuck out for me for a number of reasons. First of all, the fact that Satan here, talking to God, has asked for permission to shake the church, to violently sift them like wheat. See, the process of sifting wheat is a violent process, especially in those days, where they would take the stalk or the shaft of the wheat and they would strike it against rocks in order to loosen the kernel from the shaft. See, the prize aspect of wheat is the wheat kernel, not the stalk that it grows on. And so they didn't need that part. They wanted to separate what was good from the rest of it. Again, this illustration is used to describe what Satan wanted to do to the disciples. In essence, he wanted this difficult time, this crisis that they were about to walk through, to beat their faith out of them, to separate them from their faith. Now, again, if I'm Peter and Jesus is telling me that Satan just asked permission to beat the faith out of us, my first response to Jesus is, "You said no, right?" I mean, he asked for permission, meaning he can't do this on his own. So you said no, right, Jesus? But if you notice, Jesus didn't say no to Satan's request. As a matter of fact, he allowed it. He granted it. Again, sometimes we don't understand why bad things happen. I'm not saying that God is the orchestrator behind COVID-19. I'm not saying that he allowed this to happen for no good reason. What I am saying is whether this is something from God or something from the enemy, it still requires God's permission. And what God does is he's able to take what the enemy intended to hurt us and turn it to good. See, Jesus knew, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to strengthen their faith. So Jesus says, I gave him permission, but I prayed for your faith, Peter, that it would not fail. And I love that that's what he prayed for. See, in this time frame that we're in right now, it's not a coincidence, I think, that we're celebrating Passion Week at the same time, at least in the Chicagoland area, where we're supposed to be hitting the biggest peak when it comes to people having coronavirus or even dying from it. But Jesus is able to use these crisis moments, these difficult times that the enemy is trying to use to hurt us, and he can turn it for good. It's in these moments where faith is being tested, and when faith is tested, it is proven. See, for many of us, we have been drawn closer to God as a result of this situation. We began to understand that our hope can't be put in anything else in this world, that we can quickly lose our jobs, that sports can be shut off all across the world, that the stock market can crash in an instant, that nothing in this world is promised except for the promises that God gives us. It's where faith rises up and becomes the catalyst for everything else in our life. Church, I want to encourage you. Now is the season for faith. Satan is going to try to rip faith out of your hands. But the Bible over and over again calls us to cling to our faith, to hold on to it with dear life, to trust God. See, faith is the hope in things that we don't see yet. We have faith that this virus will come to an end. We have faith that we'll be able to resume life at least semi-normally. We have faith that when the church opens up again, we'll be able to celebrate like never before in that building. I love what Jesus says. He says, Satan asked to sift you like wheat, but I have prayed for you, Peter. And he says this word, when you come back. I love the term when, not if. He knew Peter would be able to come out of this because he prayed for his faith. He says, when you come back, go and strengthen your brothers. Church, I want to pray that this would be a season where your faith increases and not decreases. So that when we gather together again, whether it's in a church building or at the job or in school or no matter what it is, when we gather again, we will strengthen those who maybe lost faith, or we will strengthen those who are still wandering looking for faith. I love you. God bless you, and we'll see you later.